Welcome to the Disconnection Podcast. My name is Ben Harmadi, and I'm here with Cal Nielsen, and we're your hosts for today's show. During this episode at Disconnection, we'll be speaking to Michael Cangro, and we have him here right across from us in the office today, studio today. How are you doing today, Mikey?
Pretty good.
Pleasure to have you. Mikey's been a good friend of me and Kyle's for forever, probably 15,
Middle
20
school,
years. Yeah, I've
say
known Michael
since
preschool, I think.
Oh,
It's
shit.
something stupid, yeah.
I would say I've known you since we were 11. It's been
Is that when middle school starts?
yeah, 11, 10, something like that.
So like 15 years.
Yeah, wow.
Damn, long fucking time.
Getting old.
I always say the story how Mikey gelled my hair as like a preschooler or whatever it was. It was like in camp, and he was like, "Hey, you want to be one of the cool kids? You gotta have this in your hair." And he gave me some cool mousse, set me up. Just when I had hair.
So let's hop right in. You are a dispatcher, a police dispatcher, and you're also a volunteer firefighter.
Yep.
But that's not where you started off at. What did you do and enjoy when you were younger?
Music was really the be-all, end-all growing up. Went to Hunter College in the city. I went for 5 years, have a bachelor's in music, and now I don't do anything with music besides hobby-wise.
You were doing like classical music there, or it was more rock and roll?
At school, it was classical and jazz. Outside of school, all rock music. It was actually mostly solo stuff. The jazz, I played with small like combos, or I played with a big band. And the big band was probably my favorite. That was really cool.
The most
Count
enjoyable.
Basie. Yeah. Cool like Count Basie music, tons of horns, big saxophone section.
Is there improvisation when you're playing with a big band, or is it very strict like
No,
sheet music?
definitely improvisation. When you play like Count Basie, you're comping, so you're really playing rhythm guitar, but you're still improvising that rhythm guitar. Whether you're playing, only parts of chords, you're making the rhythms up, and then you usually get a solo section, just kind of like jazz in general.
Everybody rocks a solo.
Yeah.
Not bad. No.
So at what point did you decide, hey, I want to, step into a burning building and fight this fire?
My sophomore year of college, I joined the fire department, and it was kind of just a hobby. I thought it was going to be something cool to do. After about like a year, I finished training. I went to like my first real fire, and then I was hooked. Instantly hooked.
It was just really hot, or
The camaraderie with the guys at the firehouse, and the adrenaline rush, just feeling like you're helping someone, like everything about it, I was 100% hooked.
At what point coming up to the fire, riding the truck, were you like, this is it, this is what I'm enjoying?
Well, I didn't go to my first real fire for a while because I was doing training. I was on my probationary period. So, before that, it was mostly like alarm calls, carbon monoxide alarms, gas leaks, water leaks, everything that's not actual fire. And even then, I was hooked, riding the truck, being with all the guys, hanging out at the firehouse, just drilling and doing the training. I mean, I fell in love, like instantly.
But was there, like, when you went on your first actual call, was there fear even though you had trained, or did you feel so, like, second nature at that point, even though you hadn't been in a fire?
Well, the actual very first call I went on, I remember very well because it was the first time I rode the fire truck. And
you get to slide down the pole for the first time?
we don't have a pole.
Damn it.
Yeah, it's so iconic.
Yeah, the pole is pretty iconic. I remember I didn't really fully understand like the different like tones that go off on the radio when you get a call. And I remember everyone was just kind of throwing their gear on. And now I know that it was like a low level kind of just alarm, which still gets treated seriously, but it's not, coming in as a report of a house on fire or a structure on fire. So I'm like throwing on my gear. I'm putting on like my gloves and my hood, and I'm getting like fully dressed up, kind of like, what am I going to? And then they get me on the truck, and we ended up not even getting off the truck. And I just remember feeling like, the rookie, like everyone else is kind of like laid back, and I'm like bundled up, all ready to go. But yeah, I mean, everything up to that point was just I got hooked instantly. Like the same way when I picked up a guitar and I like really started to learn how to play and I got hooked, this is the same thing.
Have you had experiences with anything else in your life where you felt you've been hooked in that kind of way, that it really tugged on your life strings? Do you have a small hobby that maybe we don't know about? Model airplanes?
Yeah.
paper
I'd say
cars.
rock climbing.
Rock climbing.
Yeah.
True. Oh yeah, you've gotten really into rock climbing actually.
Yeah.
You guys have like big mats you get also, right? Just in case you fall
Yeah,
off.
so when you go out, so when you do bouldering, which is a type of rock climbing, it's like low rocks, you're not climbing 100 feet up, you're climbing maybe like 20, 22 feet up, less even. And they have these crash pads that like fold up into backpacks so that if you fall on the mat.
Honestly, at rock climbing, it's great to see the progression of skill and to see like, oh, like you couldn't hold that little, notch before. And then seeing yourself like a day later, a week later, however long it might be that you're working on it, to be like, wow, like I can now hold that. That's so cool.
My fingers have now gotten chalky enough to be able to stick in there, right?
So, at what point during your volunteer firefighter did you say, okay, like I'm going to get more into public service. I'm going to work for a police dispatch?
I actually never really wanted to be a dispatcher. I was on the job with my volunteer department for 4 years, and I decided I wanted to try and get a full-time career position at a fire department, which is I'm in the process of doing now. And in that city, they told me like be a dispatcher. It'll get your foot in the door. It may help. It'll give you a job because at the time I did not have a full-time job, and it's a good job. It has benefits. I start my time in the pension, so I kind of just went for it, and I took the classes, got the certifications, applied for the job, and then I kind of just started. I got thrown right into it. So there was never really a moment where I said, I'm going to be a police dispatcher, because it never really went through my head.
Did becoming a dispatcher ever make you question if you wanted to become an officer at any point?
Like a police officer?
Yeah.
I guess occasionally,
Just because you're in the environment?
That's what I would think.
I'm
like,
in the
just like-
environment. I take the calls. And it's the same type of thing, the camaraderie between the cops. And because I'm actually in the police department, so with my job, I do, I answer 911 calls. I answer the regular police department lines, the regular fire department lines, and I dispatch for not just the police, but also the fire department and the ambulance.
Would you say that the certification or the training to become a police dispatch was difficult? What did it entail?
I had to get a certification called BTC, which is Basic Telecommunicator, and then I had to get a certification called EMD, which is Emergency Medical Dispatch. I think it took about like 2 weeks to do it all. It really wasn't too difficult. I had a great teacher.
That's less than I imagined, honestly. And they'll just throw you on the job after 2 weeks of.
I mean, then you do in-house training. I don't get to work and they say, okay, you could start picking up 911 calls. The certifications took about 2 weeks. Then I had about 2 to 3 months of training, like in-house, on the job kind of thing, where they do it in steps. So at first, I could take the administrative calls, meaning the non-emergency calls. Then I could start, dispatching the ambulances. Then when I get comfortable with that, I could start doing the fire department stuff. Then I could start taking 911 calls, and then I could start doing the police stuff. Because the police is definitely the most interactive side of the
calls,
job.
yeah. Can imagine. Do you have any calls that stick out specifically as interesting or horrific or great or wholesome?
In terms of like horrific, there's tons of calls that you don't really want to answer. And because I'm a fireman and because I like to be in the field and not behind a desk, any type of fire-related call always gets me like a little frustrated. Someone calls up and says their house is on fire. I don't want to sit behind the desk. I want to go run onto the fire truck and grab my gear. I don't want to be stationary.
Is there any like way to be able to get up and go do fire thing, or you got to be doing one or the other?
Nope.
Yeah.
I am stuck behind that desk,
That sucks.
pushing buttons. I take pride in what I do, and I'm good at what I do, but it definitely gets frustrating, specifically with the fire-related stuff, where
You're just seeing
I'm
action.
just sitting there.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that I'm behind the scene, but like I don't need praise or anything. But the fact that I have to just sit there when I could be like on a hose line or whatever,
It gets to you a little bit.
it's frustrating. It doesn't really get me. It's more frustrating. The stuff that's like more horrific in terms of like gets to you. You know, you pick up the phone and there's a mom saying my baby's not breathing, you know, which happens more than you'd think. Or, you know, someone comes home and they find, you know, one of their parents hanging from like a banister on the stairs, you know, just not good stuff.
One of their parents hanging from a banister on the stairs? That sounds horrifying.
Yeah. And I mean, those are, you know, extreme. Then there's stuff that's a little less extreme, but, you know, a lot of like domestic violence stuff that goes on, you know, it happens everywhere.
Are you staying on the phone with them while you call the ambulance, or are
Yeah.
you telling them, hey, like it's okay, everything? Like,
So
walk
with my
us through
job,
it.
so there's 2 people in the room. Occasionally there's 3, and we each are assigned to different kinds of jobs. So if there's 2 people in the room, you know, let's say it's myself and Ben. That day he's assigned to doing, you know, the fire department stuff, the ambulance stuff, and taking calls, and I'd be assigned to all police stuff. As a police dispatcher, I don't want to be on the phone as much as possible because the police radio is what's constantly going, you know, just all day.
They're talking to each other.
Yep, they're calling into me, they're talking to each other, you know, they're pulling over cars. I need to know every little thing that's going on. They need to come inside the building for a minute, I need to know. They need to use the bathroom, I need to know. I mean, I need to know everything.
If a cop needs to come into your building, you're saying?
Yep.
It's almost like your HQ.
He's
Yeah,
the man in the
that's what I
chair.
am. Yeah, I'm headquarters, dispatch
You're
headquarters. you know.
Ned from Spider-Man. You're
Yeah,
this man in
I'm the
chair.
man in the chair.
Exactly.
Yep, which I hate because I like being out, but I am the man in the chair.
You
sometimes.
get the dual identities. You get to be Spider-Man, aka a firefighter, and then you get to be the man in the chair as a dispatcher.
Yep. So, you know, if I was taking the phone call or if Ben was taking the phone call, he would kind of give me heads up as to what was going on so that I could start sending police officers over and an ambulance over. And, you know, then we kind of take it from there. Maybe a second person calls in. Now we're both on the phone and I'm still doing the radio and he's doing the radio. And it gets to be teamwork. But if I take a call and it's something like that, I'm staying on the line until there's people there every time.
Now, since you started working there, have there been any failures in this system where you've seen people fuck up or this not working or somebody missing to tell somebody something and it fucking something up?
I mean, there's usually like minor mistakes here and there, but it's always fixable.
Nothing
I've never
crucial.
seen anything like major, but the people I work with are very good at their jobs. I mean, I trust them all to do their jobs well, and I've never really had an issue with something like that.
When someone calls up, you had said earlier, like, I'm calling up, you know, please help me, my baby isn't breathing. Are you walking that mother through, you know, CPR?
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's a young kid, like are you walking that person that's calling you through CPR?
Yep. So we have something called, you know, medical guide cards, and it's literally like a PowerPoint of the questions we ask depending on the medical call. So, you know, I pick up the phone, 911, where is your emergency? And you say, you know, I'm at 123, you know, Maple Street or something. And, you know, I get the basic information, your phone number, your name, and then I say, you know, okay, how old is the patient? 1. Okay, male or female, you know, male. Are they conscious? No. Are they breathing? No. And then the first thing I'm going to do is get into my CPR instructions. You know, if they're not conscious and they're not breathing, they need CPR. Now, sometimes they really do need CPR. Sometimes the caller doesn't really know. Sometimes they don't want to do CPR. Sometimes they do want to do CPR. It's very up in the air with what goes on after that. But there have been many times where I'm giving CPR instructions over the phone and counting, like with the person, because you're supposed to do 30 compressions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm counting, you know, 1, 2, 3, and making sure that they're doing them fast enough
So you've
to
literally
give,
like
sufficient CPR.
step by step heard somebody's life being saved.
I mean, potentially, I guess. You know, sometimes they make it out, sometimes they don't. I've had both scenarios. It's very up in the air.
And do you feel that weighs on your soul ever?
Not particularly. You know, I do the job the best of my ability, and I'm just giving instructions over the phone, so I'm not physically there.
Is it makes it a little easier to detach?
I think it makes me a little bit disconnected.
There it
I
is. There it is.
Said the podcast name.
There it is.
If someone says that they don't want to do the CPR to whoever they're with and that person is unconscious, do you kind of have to like convince them like, hey, you need to?
I don't have to. I try, but I've had that before. But also, you come home and you think someone's dead because they're cold and blue. They're probably dead and they don't want to give CPR. I can't force them to give CPR instructions. To give CPR. They're not going to get in trouble when the police officer gets there and they weren't giving CPR, or when the ambulance gets there, whoever gets there first. They're not professionals. They're civilians who are in a horrible, shock that their loved one is either dying or dead, and they freeze up. They don't know what to do. And I mean, it's understandable. Some people are all about it, and it's
All about it, meaning
they're jumping right in.
Tell me what to do.
Yep, they're jumping right in.
Cool.
Yeah, and it kind of gives you that like fight or flight mentality, and I could really like see it when I take some of these phone calls. Like some people jump right in, and some people are like, nope, I want nothing to do with it.
The nothing to do with it people are, does it seem more like it's fear, or they just don't feel comfortable doing it? Or where do you think it stems from, or where do you see it coming from?
I've had a little bit of both. Definitely a little bit of both.
You were saying, just so we can get off of CPR, you were saying domestic violence is something that is prevalent, a phone call that you'll receive. Do you think that domestic violence is understated in our society, that it's happening a lot more than we believe?
Probably. I mean, I don't really know the statistics, so I'm definitely no expert on, giving a definite answer, but it's it happens a lot.
Yeah.
And it happens everywhere. It also happens a lot that's
Like
not
once a week,
reported.
once a day?
Where I work, I work in a busy city, so it happens often. Once a day is probably the minimum.
Wow. I did not expect that every day. That is pretty.
Are you receiving a lot of phone calls about these domestic violence cases where it's the same person calling?
We definitely have repeat offenders. You try not to pay too much attention. I need to in a way, but I don't like trying to like keep tabs on people. It's, I show up, I do my job for the day, and then I go home, and then that's it.
How many calls do you think you answer during a single shift?
It depends on the type of shift I work. So because I work nights, I work days, I work 12-hour shifts, I work weekends, I work weekdays, holidays. We don't get days off. So obviously a Sunday, like Easter Sunday, is going to be slow and not a lot of calls. And, a Friday night in the middle of the summer at 10 o'clock, I'm going to have a ton of calls. So it's hard to say. Maybe like 100, give or take.
What's one thing you would want to say to somebody calling a dispatcher that's never called a dispatcher before that can make your job easier or more practical and effective?
I think one of the biggest problems with the 911 calls is that people are usually freaked out and they just blurt out a ton of information. And I constantly have to tell people, ma'am, please slow down. Just let me ask you specific questions, because these answers will help me further assist you quicker. I don't need to know every little bit of information. So when people call up, a simple example would be a car accident. Oh my God, I'm walking down the street and I just saw a car flip over, which, happens. We call a rollover. And they just start blurting out information. Like, I need to know where before anything else. And, when you're freaked out and you see a car flip over and you're not used to dealing with that kind of thing, that's the last thing you're thinking of. You don't even know where you are anymore. And I have to ask like multiple times, okay, well, where are you? But the car flipped over, there's people inside, it's smoking. Okay, but where?
Right. Yeah, I guess it's tough to have your thoughts together.
Yeah,
in those kind of
it is tough,
situations for sure.
You can't blame people in certain, instances, but I need to ask very specific questions for a very specific reason, and there's always like a rhyme or reason to why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's.
Don't question your dispatcher is the answer, right? Just like listen to what they're asking you.
Yeah, a big thing too is the medical calls. So with the medical calls, there's a ton of questions I have to ask. So like I was saying, that like PowerPoint that I have, there's, a tab for each what we call chief complaint. So if someone says their stomach hurts, I click on the card that says abdominal pains. And then based on that card, it gives me a bunch of questions. And based on those answers is what kind of care I send them. Do I send them EMTs or do I send them paramedics?
Do you get prank phone calls?
We do, actually. The other day, there was a couple of kids at a school calling 911, and the first call that they called, I picked up, and it was a little girl, like young, who said, "There's someone in my house," and then hung up. And
Jeez.
when we get calls like that, that's not something that we can just brush aside.
Right, no,
We
that's
have
terrifying.
to take it extremely seriously, because if there really is someone in their house, like, I mean,
You have to send help.
yeah, it's terrible. So I have to call back over and over and over again, or, ping the cell phone, like call the cell phone carrier, say, "Listen, it's, such and such police department. We need to ping the phone for this reason. We have to send faxes back and forth. There's paperwork."
What does that mean, ping the phone? Like you can get the
Like
provider?
based off of satellite.
Like it'll tell you where it is when you say ping? Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. And
Sometimes it's very accurate. Sometimes it's really not accurate.
interesting. And
Yeah.
can the provider send messages to the text phone through you guys, to the telephone through you guys?
We've never done that. I'm actually not sure if they could do that.
Mm.
I'm sure they could. I mean, it's just like sending a text message.
Yeah,
but
no.
Is the provider also saying like, hey, wait a second, okay, dispatch, whatever, why are you trying to locate this person?
They usually don't question us. They know there's a special phone number that we call for each provider. So, a perfect example, this is a couple of months back now, but it was really late at night on a weekend, and I got a call, and it sounded like a prank phone call. It sounded like this guy was, wasted, drinking all night, and then got home and was calling 911. And he was slurring his words. He couldn't speak. I was asking him questions, and he'd hang up. I'd call him back. Same kind of thing, over and over and over again. I didn't feel right about it, and I couldn't get a good location from the ping. So we have what's called phase 1 and phase 2 for like pinging a cell phone. When it's phase 1, it means it's just pinging the cell phone tower that it's using. So, there's cell phone towers throughout each city and, area, depending on the cell phone provider. So it was pinging to a cell phone tower, but that could be anywhere, And then I was getting a phase 2, which is a more smaller area, but it's still not that accurate. So I was trying to keep him on the phone as long as possible and hitting the button to ping it, and it was kind of bouncing around like 2 streets in a neighboring town. But if the guy's in his house, I mean, it could be any house on those streets, and it could just be wrong. So I called the cell phone provider, on the special hotline for law enforcement, and I said, we need not to ping the phone, but can you please give me the, information on his account? So give me like his billing address so that I could see if it is one of those streets, because if it is, then I could send people there, because either the guy is prank phone calling and, someone should speak to him because he's tying up the lines, right, or he seriously needs help. I mean, even if he was just really that drunk and needed, to go to the hospital and get like an IV for a little bit. But I ended up getting an address from the cell phone provider, and I called the neighboring town. I explained everything that happened, and I sent people over. And it turns out that it was, not an elderly guy, but an older man who fell down his basement stairs and had a stroke.
Oh my God.
And was bleeding from the head.
He wasn't drunk?
He was not drunk.
Wow.
So his words were so slurred because of how bad his stroke was.
Wow, that's terrible.
Yeah. So here I am, thinking it may be a prank phone call. It may be a drunk guy.
Right.
And it wasn't either.
Because it was a Saturday night at like 4 a.m.
Sure.
And, it ends up
Well,
that
good
this
on
guy
you
was
for
dying
following,
on his
yeah.
basement floor, and they had to like break in the door, and they got inside, and, they ended up transporting him to the hospital, and everything was okay. But I mean, it's little things like that where I really have to take control.
Thank God.
And remain calm,
Yeah.
Keep your head on
Don't
your
get
shoulders.
annoyed at 4 a.m. thinking you're being prank called at a dispatch number. I mean,
And that's the thing too. I mean, I could have hung up and then tried calling back 2 or 3 times, and maybe he answered, maybe he didn't. Maybe I couldn't get an address. Maybe I couldn't get any other information. And maybe I'd just write in our computer system like a small, like a little write-up, like this is the phone number that called, this is how the call went, and that's it. I couldn't get a location. I couldn't get a phase 2 ping. maybe send police officers to the streets to drive through, see if anyone flags them down.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would have been it. And then the guy probably would have died. But, taking that extra step, going that extra mile, saying this doesn't feel right, calling the cell phone provider, trying to get a location. And I got lucky that he was home.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the billing address is totally different. And I just know that's not where he is.
What are the obligations of the cell phone provider?
So when...
Do you know? I mean, can I ask you that?
I don't know like particularly, but there's never been an instance where we've called up and said we need to ping a phone and they said no.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you have to keep them, you were saying you have to keep him on the line in order for it to establish?
No. So we have like an in-house ping system, which, they have to be on the line for. Once they hang up, it doesn't work. When we call the cell phone provider, they don't have to be on the phone.
So the in-house ping systems is the true triangulating the phone system?
No, that would probably be the cell phone provider.
Okay.
To be honest, I don't really know how it works. I just know
Yeah.
I press a specific button and I know how to read the information and then take it from there. But all like that, like tower, radio,
But it only works if
transmission
they call,
It only works if they call.
because otherwise you're going off of nothing.
Yep.
All right, that makes sense.
And it also only works with the 911 lines.
What do you mean?
So if someone calls the police department, like their main line, like you Google such and such police and call them, hey, my car, I'm parking it on the street overnight. We can't ping that in-house. But we could say, okay, we have a cell phone number. Let's call the cell phone provider, and they could ping it.
Interesting.
So in-house pinging only works for 911 calls.
Wait, you just said they don't ask for a reason when you ask them to ping a phone?
I mean, we'll usually give them like a very brief, it's a 911 call. And,
Right.
And that's usually
it.
sufficient. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
But you're also calling their hotline. Like, hey, I am a dispatcher. I have your hotline.
Like, I
Yep.
wonder if I called their hotline and asked to ping somebody's phone if I somehow came into that number.
Well, they also fax you over a form, and you need to fill out that form and send it.
Well, that'll do it.
How long does that process take?
They'll usually give you so they'll hang up and they'll do it and they'll call you back. While they're doing that, they fax it over. If they give you the information before they send it back or vice versa, it's usually pretty quick.
But there has to be a send back of faxing.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of a
And then,
verification to remember that, or to verify that you are, in fact, a dispatcher.
Yep, and we keep all that stuff on record. There's files, folders that they keep for X amount of years in case they need to go back to it.
What would you say to anybody who would want to kind of take this path of, I don't know, either becoming a fireman or becoming a dispatcher, being a public servant or helping people in their own way?
I mean, if you're interested in being a firefighter, there's tons of volunteer departments. I mean, 80 to 85% of the United States is volunteer, which most people don't know.
But volunteer firefighters, as far as I understand, they do get paid.
They usually get like a stipend check.
Okay.
Explain what that is, please.
Every quarter, depending on how many calls you make and how many drills you go to and meetings, or each department is a little bit different, but you get a check based on those numbers. It's really not a lot. No one's doing it for the money. It's not like a job.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make a living off of it.
Absolutely not.
Even if you go to every single phone call?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, you can't make a living off that. Not even close.
And can you graduate from volunteer to full-time, or not every force has full-time firemen?
No, that's what I'm saying. So like 80 to 85% of America is fully volunteer.
Right.
Yep.
Wow. So every firehouse, like firehouses are mostly fully volunteer is what you're saying?
Mostly, yeah.
Gotcha.
Big cities are not, New York City, Patterson, Jersey City, Newark.
What would you say for someone like Ben just asked that wants to be a police dispatcher, firefighter? What are some of the moral and ethical things they may have to deal with?
As a firefighter?
As a police dispatcher too.
As a dispatcher? I think the end-all, be-all is do the right thing. You're there to help people, not for your own reasons. The hours are not great. I work weekends, I work holidays, I work nights, I work crazy hours where I have to go in at 3 o'clock in the morning. If someone calls out, they'll knock on my door and tell me I have to come to work at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a lot of downsides to the job, but I enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy helping people, and it can be fun. It really can be fun. You know, the other day I felt like I was like a little detective. We had a shooting where 2 people got shot. One got shot 11 times.
Oh my God.
And one got shot 7 times. They both lived, which is out of control.
This was a shooting in the city that you work in,
Mm-hmm.
and these 11 times, like, is that an automatic weapon to get 11 bullets out? He's got 18 bullets out between
It was
two
a handgun.
people.
It was a handgun.
Yeah,
That's
you could-
one clip in a handgun to
He
be
reloaded.
18 bullets. Yeah.
You reloaded?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds nuts.
I don't know like the exact details of everything,
Right.
but we got 2 calls and that's it, which is amazing to me because usually when something of that nature happens, we get a ton of phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
There's a house on fire on the street. Every single person that's passing wants to call 911. When you hear gunshots like that in the morning, when people are around and awake, it's unbelievable that we only got 2 phone calls. So the guy, ran outside. They knew who it was. They knew his name. So we get a description of him. We try to find out where he went. They said he ran down this way. What's he wearing? What does he look like? Hair color, any kind of details to help us out. Turns out he runs and gets into a white car. So at this point, all I have is a name, a description, and that he ran this way and possibly got into a white car. So, while everything is going on and while I'm sending units everywhere, while I'm setting up a perimeter, while we're calling the sheriff's department to get some canines out there to search for the guy, while we're sending ambulances to help these people, while all this craziness is going on, I go into the DMV records and I say, okay, I have this guy's name. Let me see if I could search to see if he has any vehicles registered to him. Maybe one of those are white. So that's what I do. I look up the DMV records and I see that there's a white vehicle registered to him. So I put it out to all the cops and I say, listen, there's a white such and such vehicle registered to him that may be the vehicle he got into. This is the license plate. Be on the lookout. And then at the same time, I'm getting on the state police radio, letting all the surrounding towns around us know this is what just happened. This is the way he possibly went. He's possibly in this vehicle. Give a description of the guy, all that. So he went home to one of the surrounding towns by us, which I also knew the address from his DMV record, which is, the motor vehicle stuff. And I called their cops and I said, listen, can you go to his house, check to see if he's there? So they go there. He wasn't there. But about 5 minutes later, there's a carjacking on that street that he lives on.
Oh my God.
They get a description. It's somewhat matched. I called them on the phone. I was like, is this the same guy? Is this the vehicle he got out of? Whatever. Turns out, same guy. So he shot 2 people in our city, went to a different city, robbed, carjacked someone at gunpoint, got in their car, and then it ended up being a big police chase on one of the highways. He eventually crashed his car and they caught him. But
Was there a chase? Did he get out of the car and start running, or
he did not get out of the car and start running. At least not that I know of. It wasn't like a major car crash, but he crashed his car and then they got him. Little things like that. I mean, I'm behind the scenes and I'm the one who figured out what kind of car it was. I'm the one who figured out that they may be the same guy and made contact. I'm the one who told that city to go check on his house. I mean, I really felt like I was running the show. And that's where it's a little crazy to say because it's horrible because people were getting shot at. But that's where it gets like a little fun for me. Like it gets
You
exciting.
feel like you're a part of the
I feel
scene.
like I'm
Yeah.
really doing something as opposed to just answering calls.
Well,
Yes, you can park your car there.
I
No,
would
you
say
can't do
this is
this.
you actively helping a situation in the best way that you possibly can with the talents that you have.
Yep. And when stuff like that happens, that's when I go home and feel good about what I do. That's
Sure,
when I go
I
home
can
and say
see
to my
that.
friends, like, oh man, this crazy stuff happened at work today.
I'd say
Check
fuck
it
yeah
out,
after
you
a
know?
day like that, besides the people getting shot and dying. But
They also lived. They
Oh.
did live, which makes it better.
11 shots he lived?
Yep.
That's nuts. How does that where do you get shot 11 times and make it out?
I don't know.
Not in the chest, like
Yeah.
What?
I really don't know, to be honest.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Tell us about your recent promotion with the fire department.
So with volunteer departments, you get nominated for a position, there's certain qualifications you need, certain certificates, time on the job, whatever. And then you get voted in. So I just got voted in as lieutenant at the end of last year. So I started in January. As a lieutenant, I'm basically in charge of my small crew. So if I go out on the engine company, I'm in charge of that engine specifically. If I go out on the ladder, I'm in charge of the ladder company.
That's pretty sick.
I get to sit in the front seat, do the sirens and the lights.
That's a good time. Do you feel more responsibility since you've taken up that role?
There's definitely more responsibility, without a doubt. Behind the scenes stuff, we go to officers' meetings, we do extra training. We just went out to Indianapolis to what's called FDIC, took a bunch of classes out there. It's like a national fire expo. And then just in terms of making decisions for people, telling people what to do.
Does that mean you feel more responsible for people's lives as well? Like
Sure.
on your team?
Definitely. We go to a fire and I tell them, let's say I'm on the ladder company and we're assigned to venting out windows. And I tell my guys to take a specific window instead of a different window. I could cause fire conditions to get worse as opposed to better. And that's on me for making that decision. A lot of times, whoever is command of the scene, like incident commander, will tell us what to do. And then I kind of relay that message and make sure everything gets done well and, do it with them. But a lot more responsibility.
Some more money?
No more money.
Damn.
Right, because it's volunteer.
Because it's volunteer.
I thought Mikey wasn't volunteer. You're not full-time, or you're working to be full-time?
Working to be
right
full-time,
now?
yeah.
Gotcha.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. We wish
Doing
you
everything I
luck.
can.
Well, guys, thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Disconnection Podcast, where we aim to inform, inspire, and close the disconnections in your life. We'd like to thank our guest for joining us today, Michael Cangro, and delivering a unique perspective on a range of topics. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on iTunes, YouTube, the podcast app, and Spotify. My name is Kyle.
And I've been Ben.
And we'll catch you on the next episode of
Disconnection.
It seems to be a thing.
It's pretty good.
I like this.
It's pretty good, yeah.